The presidential and National Assembly elections, INEC has announced that it will not be conducting election in 240 polling units. We'll tell you why on the show today. Thanks for joining us on the program. I am Nifemi Oguntoye. Let's begin with news coming from the National Board for Technical Education that the federal government has now directed that all polytechnics in the country shut down until after the forthcoming general election. The directive was contained in a circular issued by the Federal Minister of Education, directing the Executive Secretary of the National Board for Technical Education, Professor Idris Bogaji, to communicate to rectors as well as provosts of polytechnic. And this is coming just a few days after a similar directive was given to shut down universities across Nigeria. Now, the Independent National Electoral Commission says election will not hold in 240 polling units across the country. Chairman of INEC, Mahmoud Yakub, says this. He made this known at the meeting with leaders of political parties earlier today in Abuja. In his words, nobody chose to vote in those polling units. Now, let's get more perspective in this report.
The electoral umpire meets the political players contesting for votes. This kind of meeting is to enhance transparency and improve the credibility of the Electoral Commission. The chairman of INEC brings his visitors up to speed with plans and preparations of the commission to conduct the election in 176,846 polling units. But he says there will be no election in 240 polling units.
There are 240 polling units without registered voters spread across 28 states and the Federal Capital Territory. They range from 1 polling unit to 12 polling units in each state and the FCT, except Taraba and Imo states with 34 and 38 polling units respectively. No new registrants choose the polling units and no voters indicated interest to transfer to them during the last continuous voter registration exercise, mainly for security reasons. This means that no elections will be held in these polling units.
The political parties are also largely satisfied with the disposition of INEC towards discharging their primary responsibility of conducting elections. They also worry about the harsh political climate created by politicians.
It is an abhorrence and crudity, if not savagery, to see state governors denying campaign venues to political parties other than their own. This is crude, undemocratic, primitive, and uncivilized. Finally, I would want to admonish party leaders that having observed that the elections are conducted free, fair, and credible, the result should be accepted for the love of our country.
The political parties represented here will now return to their campaigns as the date for voting draws nearer. Meanwhile, the INEC chairman assured that the commission will make deliberate efforts to ensure no voter is disenfranchised. Femi Akonde, TVC News, Abuja.
Senior political correspondent Ayo Zugbaku is here with me in the studio for more on this development. When INEC says election will not hold in 240 polling units, is a kind of story that you need to help the viewer understand, because it's easy to just run away with the story until you do some calculations to find out that that's just some 0.1% of the total number of polling units in Nigeria. Help us make sense of the reasons INEC is given this time.
I want to start by telling our viewers that there's no cause for alarm.
Indeed.
It's not in any way targeted at disenfranchising anybody. Now, we have situations whereby we've covered the election in the past, and you have a secondary school, a primary school, a venue that they have like 5-6 polling units.
Indeed.
In INEC bids to make sure that, we decongest most of these polling units, that, we don't want more than 500 people in a particular polling unit. We want to create more polling units. In one secondary school, they might concentrate like 10 polling units in that secondary school, and you discover that at the end of the day, the purpose had been defeated, that people will come and some of those polling units will be vacant. And those polling units that are vacant, that people are not voting there, they've gone through all their rerun and they've checked it, that's how impactful would this exercise be how impactful with this polling unit. Our record of election in the past, the last presidential election, the last election we've had here, how has it affected this particular? And they've looked at what I would call the redundant polling units.
Okay.
Polling units that are not serving any purpose, that would not in any way disenfranchise people to arrive at this decision.
Yeah, however, when you look at the states concerned, you see Imo with 38 polling units, followed by Taraba. Some are concerned, some are already talking about perhaps the security challenges that we've witnessed and reported in this part of the country, and how much of impact that will have in voter turnout in those areas.
INEC will also do what we call their own SWOT analysis, that look areas that are, prone to violence. They won't want to risk the coppers, they won't want to risk their hard dog staff, and they will come to a conclusion that instead of having polling units at this particular flashpoint, let's concentrate security on this point and make it just one polling unit, so that people from this flashpoint can just make it down to another polling unit to vote.
Absolutely.
It's just as simple as that.
You recall also that some months ago, INEC added over 56,000 new polling units to, decongest certain polling units. How much impact do you see that have in this?
I told you earlier that
election?
For 2019 election, it needed to be a little bit more than 120,000 polling units nationwide. So INEC was looking for more accessibility, looking for how the thing is going to get friendlier. You just move in front of your house, you get your polling unit, just a walking distance from your houses. So INEC created more polling units. But in doing the analysis right, looking at the results from the off-season election, looking at the 2015 election, looking at the 2019 election, looking at the result and how it came through all these polling units, they've been able to substitute and eliminate some of these polling units. And this is what you're having here.
Very quickly, let's take a look at the voting procedure. Voting is expected to start at 8:30 a.m.
Yes.
Check and be sure your name is on the register of voters in that polling unit. It again, begs the question of logistics, because it would seem that INEC has improved very tremendously in the recent election. And now that the CBN governor is saying, don't worry, we'll give you cash, you don't expect any logistic challenge this time, do you?
All your questions today, I just get it to us like, I'm not Mr. Okoye, INEC spokesperson. But then I will tell you from what I've seen.
From what you've seen, yes, in the off-season election.
In terms of logistics, it has been eliminated. Now, you have the sensitive and non-sensitive materials leaving the state headquarters a day before, and you have a situation whereby by 7:30, electoral officers, they are the polling units already deploying their materials. And the last election I covered, I now discovered that it was the electoral officers, they've set up all their logistics. They were waiting for voters to come in. That's in Ekiti
exactly
State.
what I was saying.
I noticed.
That it has improved.
They've improved on the arrival time. Yaga Africa, they have their statistics on checking out how the electoral officers, how did they get to get their agents, how did they get to the polling units. And in the last election, they were able to score them like 65%.
Indeed. So once you do that, once accredited, you will be issued a ballot paper.
Yep.
And then this document also says you can live or stay 300 meters away from the voting area to witness vote sorting and counting. It would seem that once you have your PVC and you have voted, you're still allowed to stay around, even during voting.
But you just leave that area. You leave the vicinity. When you leave the vicinity, you can just watch, and we've seen it several times. There's a kind of cordon. INEC, they have a cordon around the polling units, and they have a kind of what you use to cast your votes that make it open secret ballots, something that will cover you so that your choice and everything will be protected.
Indeed.
After that exercise, if you have 500 people at that polling station, at the end of the day, they will count one by one, and the electoral officers will make sure that the counting and sorting will be transparent. That's why you start hearing PDP, APC, PDP, APC, Labour Party, and so on and so forth. So you see it. They'll be sorting it. At the end of the day, counting one by one. And even people on that polling unit, they'll be counting with the electoral officers. It's a very interesting sight, you say, and the beauty of democracy. And at the end of the day, when they are filling the form EC8A, all the agents will now come and attest to what happened at that particular polling agent before it is transmitted electronically.
With the BVAS also comes the technology of transmitting results immediately at polling units. It means that every Nigerian now has the opportunity to see real time what the voting is at each polling unit.
It was experimented in Edo election. By Edo election, it wasn't a guesswork. We just went to the coalition center for formality in the evening, expecting the hard copy of Form EC8A across all the polling units to arrive at the state headquarters. But we've been able to track it, on the INEC website, and we had a fair idea of what the texture of the election looked like. Like in Edo State, by 4 p.m., we need a winner.
One last thing that INEC mentioned at that meeting would be its concern about attacks on political supporters during campaign. How much impact would you say that? How much work have you seen, particularly in the area of providing security for politicians? Party supporters during this campaign.
I've not seen anything. I'm afraid that even in the southeast, that people that are enthusiastic to vote for the candidates, that it might lead to apathy. 2 weeks ago, we just see Barrister Obama, Magistrate Obama, was shot on the head. The magistrate, as he was standing up, was shot. And we hear of these killings every day. And if federal government, if they don't do something to assure the people of those areas, especially not in the state capitals now, we're talking about Anambra and Imo states, we're talking about the interior areas that people will be able to exercise their franchise, it might not restore confidence for people to come out on election day to vote.
The body language is that this election will hold. So every stakeholder must get ready.
It's like signed, sealed, and delivered.
Absolutely. Senior correspondent Ayo Zugbako, thank you for talking to us tonight. And over the weekend, the Nigeria Governors Forum called on the Central Bank of Nigeria to follow the rule of law in its pursuit of the Naira redesign policy. The NGF made this position known after a meeting in Abuja through a statement signed by its chairman and Governor of Sokoto State, Aminu Tambuwa. We'll talk more about that after this break. Well, the Nigeria Governors Forum is warning that the country might be at risk of a recession following the Naira redesign policy by the CBN. The governor said the Central Bank of Nigeria was pursuing an aspirational policy of going cashless and a currency confiscation program, and not the Naira redesign policy provided for in the CBN Act. Also, the presidential candidate of APC, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, says he has nothing against the Naira redesign policy, but his concern is about the hardship Nigerians are facing as a result of cash scarcity. He expressed solidarity with those affected by the scarcity at the grassroots. He added that they have felt the brunt of petrol shortage and scarcity of new Naira notes. Part of his statement reads, while the scarcity arising from the supply of limitations of the new Naira note is still with us, we're encouraged about reports that fuel queues across the country are easing out as a result of better supply to fuel stations, end quote. Now let's talk to former Lagos State Deputy Governor Femi Pedro for more on this development. Thank you for joining us on the countdown. Let's start with the first request coming from the APC presidential candidate. Is asking the CBN to allow old and new notes coexist for the next 12 months. With the body language coming from the CBN, how feasible do you see this happen?
Well, let's give kudos to our presidential candidate, first of all. In the midst of this crisis, he has been speaking out. He has shown compassion for the common man. The average Nigerian has been suffering from the implementation of this policy. And he has said it outrightly that he has nothing against implementation of this currency policy. I mean, nothing against the policies, but for the implementation, which has been adversarial. Asiwaju has released a 6-point agenda. I'm sure many people would have read it. But let me just expatiate. The most important one is to seek relief for many Nigerians as it were today. let the old Naira notes and the new notes run pari passu. Let them just illegal tender at the same time, so that the tension in the country will ease up. The amount of cash in circulation will increase automatically, and people will go about their normal business for the next 12 months. That will give CBN enough time to print new currency notes, give Nigerians enough time to adjust to the new currency design, and then give CBN enough time to withdraw the old notes. I think this makes a lot of sense. I wish the CBN would listen to our incoming president and do the needful, because where we are today is not where we should be at all. People are really, really in pain. They are suffering, queuing up for Naira cash. Can't make simple transactions, day-to-day transactions, to pay for transport fare, to buy pepper and whatever in the market, to pay for services in cash. I mean, this has been very horrendous. So I really give it to Asiwaju Bola for this. He has also advised the central bank to stop transaction charges on mobile transfer during this period. You can see that what is happening is that there's so much pressure on the infrastructure. Everybody's trying to make transfer at the same time when the cash is not available. There's no need for punitive measure for consumers to start paying for services they are not enjoying. Secondly, it's asking that the operators should upgrade their infrastructure, should begin set a timeline for improvement of infrastructure, so that over a period of time, when we are transiting from cash to cashless, the infrastructure will have been upgraded and it will have been sufficient enough to support Nigerian transaction services all over the country. That is not the case now. We're doing cash swap on one hand, we want to migrate to cashless on the other hand, and our infrastructure is inadequate. So what you have is, continuous breakdown in the system, frustration upon frustration, people are not happy. So I hope that the CBN governor will listen to Asiwaju Bola Tinubu's proposal, more or less like an advisory suggestion, and implement immediately. This is not something that requires much debate. The whole of the country is aligned with this policy, with this suggestion. And I've been speaking to people since Asiwaju released the public statement, and a lot of people feel that it's the right step in the right direction.
The interesting part about this is that this CBN policy and its implementation strategy is solidly backed by Mr. President, who indeed represents the All Progressives Congress. But there have been quite a number of attempts to intervene. We saw the governors meet with the president. There have been quite a number of meetings in that regard. But it would seem that the same governors have also taken this case to court. So what optimism are you sharing? What alternative do you think that these stakeholders will explore in being able to implement some of these ideas and strategies that the APC candidate is bringing up?
Let's take it from where we are today. We have a Supreme Court ruling that says suspend that timeline you set. So the old Naira notes remain legal tender. The only problem is that it's not being well communicated all over the country. So there are places where people are still rejecting the old Naira notes. Then we have a Council of State meeting on Friday, even though in advisory capacity, but the CBN governor was there. And he has ears, he listened, he was part of the meeting. So you should know the sentiment being expressed by not only governors, but former head of states and even the present president. All express the same sentiment. Let the old notes and the new note run pari passu. Give it time for people to adjust. So I think these two incidents that happened in the last few days, it's more than enough to persuade the central bank governor. He holds the knife and the yam, even if the president says otherwise. He's the one that implements, he's the one that gives directives to the banks. He's the one that makes Naira available, he's the one that also asks the bank not to collect old Naira notes anymore. So pressure must be put on the central bank governor. We have no choice. He cannot dictate to the entire country doing what is not supported by majority of Nigerians. So we have to continue piling pressure from the governors, pressure from Asiwaju Bola Tinubu, the leading presidential candidate who has now turned himself to a spokesperson of the masses. He's the only one speaking out. All the other presidential candidates are hoping to benefit from this chaos. And there's nothing to benefit from the chaos when the people are not happy. You can't be gunning for president when people are not happy and supporting a policy that is not productive or is not progressive. So I believe that the options are there already. You don't need to explore new options. Let the CBN obey the federal Supreme Court order. Allow the old Naira notes to continue to be legal tender. Let CBN take the advisory of the Council of States and let it allow Naira, old Naira notes and the new notes to remain in circulation. And let the CBN governor listen to the words of wisdom. Asiwaju Bola Tinubu has spoken. And he should listen to him. He should take the 6-point agenda that he has released to the public. And there's really no rocket science in this 6-point agenda. He has thought through it, and it made a lot of sense. Even for me, I went through it and I said, wow, this is what we need at this point in time. And this is what the CBN should implement immediately. So here's the tension in the country. I still went out today and I still saw queues in many ATM points. Doesn't make sense. When people should be productive, working, they are chasing cash all over the place. Cash that they need to spend to make their life easy. They are chasing it all over the place. Doesn't make sense at all.
Help shed more light on these other 3 points. Your party's candidate is also talking about the need to bring in fintech companies with capabilities into currency swap, as well as interagency action committee for immediate oversight over the cash supply gaps.
Yeah, let me explain. The first one you mentioned, actual fact, the CBN governor mentioned that he's implementing that, but we haven't seen it done. That is appoint companies that are related, that are in the financial services industry. That's why they call them fintech companies. Appoint them as cash swap agents. That is, they take the role of banks in far-flung areas, in rural areas, inside the communities, and exchange these new old notes with new notes. You know what the CBN's governor has done that has created this serious bottleneck? It has been withdrawing old notes, and it has not been releasing new notes. That's the crux of the problem. So let them change that policy, allow agencies of CBN, agents of CBN, to go into the hinterlands, the rural areas, the farming communities, and do cash swap on behalf of CBN without charging. Without charges, the CBN should bear these charges. That is the cost of this policy to the government. That's what Asiwaju is contending with, is saying there. The other one is orientation. Even if you make a pronouncement today that the old Naira note remains legal tender, if you don't pronounce it nationally, if you don't change the mindset of the people, they will continue to reject it. And so we need organs of government across board to educate Nigerians and enlighten them that the old Naira note is still legal tender. There is fear now by people to accept, thinking that once they accept it, they are losing value because they cannot use it to make purchases. And of what use is you collecting money from somebody and you're not able to use it to make purchases? So we need to reorientate the mind of people and let them understand.
That's our time. It's just 11 more days to election, and we're looking forward to see how much impact all of these suggestions and interventions will have, particularly on the Naira and food scarcity. Femi Pedro is former Lagos State Deputy Governor. Thank you so much for talking to us on the program tonight.
Thank you.
And that's our program. Thank you for being a part of it. We'll be back same time tomorrow. Remember, you can watch a repeat broadcast at 6 a.m. tomorrow. Follow us on all of our social media handles using the hashtag TVC Countdown 2023. We'll be back at 7 p.m. with all news making headlines home and abroad. I am Nifemi Oguntoye.